She had to be cooked for, she had to be bathed, dressed. I spent a lot of time crying away from my mother and just adjusting to it.
I've seen situations where parents didn't want anyone else to help them but their children because they were the most familiar with their children, and so they wouldn't even allow outside help to come into the house.
I'm Steve Opry. As our nation's population ages, more people are providing personal care to one or both parents. In fact, many sick and frail parents spend their remaining years in total dependence on their adult children for help with daily living. How do caregivers cope when they also have careers and children of their own to manage? Even if your parents are in good health today, you need to learn about this important issue. Stay tuned as we look at a phenomenon many are calling parenting your parents. Janet Murphy is a self-employed paralegal and single mother. After her father suddenly fell ill, she took on the role of caregiver for him and for her mother, who has Alzheimer's disease.
I hadn't realized that my father had been doing so much. She had to be cooked for, she had to be bathed, dressed. I spent a lot of time crying away from my mother and just adjusting to it. Then my father got out of the hospital and was better for 4 months, and then had another crisis and ended up in the hospital for 3 months. And that's when I became the total caretaker, not only of my father and all his medical concerns, but of my mother, because his illness made my mother's illness accelerate. And she deteriorated so fast, it was unbelievable. By this time, I wasn't able to work on my own. I moved into their house in one of the extra bedrooms and just did everything and did whatever work I could on my own for my business. My father came home and I stayed there for another 3 months just doing everything. One of the things I discovered while I was going through this caretaking phase is that my sense of myself, my self-identity, is not a caretaker, even though I've been a mother and a single parent for many years. It's as a businesswoman, and I got depressed, very depressed. I didn't like the idea that I wasn't making the kind of money I was used to making. I wasn't functioning the way I was used to functioning.
Dr. Marjorie Blanchard is president and co-founder of Blanchard Training and Development. She often speaks to businesses about the growing issue of adult children caring for their parents.
We have a lot to do.
I think dealing with aging parents is becoming recognized as a workplace issue. It's estimated that as many as 30% of workers spend at least 10 hours a week caring for an aging parent if their parent is over age 65. And that's obviously going to have an impact on productivity. It's often a surprise, just at the time that you think that you are going to have the most freedom. You know, your kids are finally up and they can, the very time that you're going to have the most freedom, all of a sudden you're right back to having a pretty heavy-duty responsibility. And I think some people grieve about that as well, or at least it takes them a while to adjust to that.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Lois.
Retiree Bing Killingsworth became a caregiver to his mother after she began showing symptoms of Alzheimer's type dementia.
She'd call and she wouldn't know how to turn her air conditioning on. It was blazing hot. When I would go over and visit her, I could see that she was not taking her medicine. She was not eating well. She was confused about some things, other things. And so for a while I kept thinking maybe Mom would ask me, could she come and live with me or visit me or something like that. But then I think I read somewhere that this will never happen. So I just asked her to come over and visit. And while she was here, I went and moved all her stuff, moved it all overnight. At first, she had good long-term memory. Now she no longer has good long-term memory. For example, she doesn't know how many kids she had. But she doesn't remember short-term things hardly at all. You can You can tell her something, and in 15 minutes, she won't remember that you told her. But she can carry on a conversation, and she can fool you. She'll make things up. If she doesn't know, she just makes them up. The biggest challenge with taking care of somebody like this is patience. It's sometimes, for example, when I pick Mother up, we go a block and she will say, ask me, did you have a busy day? And I'll say, yes, I did, Mom. I had a pretty busy day. 2 more blocks, did you have a busy day? Yes, I had a busy day. And this could be repeated 5 times. So, you know, you kind of like want to say, you already asked me that. But you can't. But sometimes if you're tired or whatever, you really have to hang on and try to, and not be abrupt, but just to act like this is the first time she asked it.
Dr. B.J. Curry-Spittler is Director of Age Concerns, a long-term care management agency which coordinates support services for the elderly.
Adult children come to us often at their wits' end. Unfortunately, they've wanted to figure this out by themselves. And the thing that we often hear first is, my mother is just driving me crazy. Or, I'm afraid that she's going to seriously injure herself, and she won't listen to a thing I say. The daughters are often in the worst bind, though, because they're 40, 45, and their husbands are busy with their careers. They may be busy with their own careers. They probably have teenage children, and we all know that manages to keep people pretty busy. And then they have Mom, who is fiercely independent, but getting more and more frail. Or they have Mom, who has been recently widowed and who is becoming very depressed and is not functioning well and says, oh, I'm just fine, just leave me alone. But she's not just fine. She's not eating, she's not sleeping, she's beginning to be forgetful. There are all kinds of things that are going on. And that's when daughters are apt to come to us and say, I just can't manage this.
Sue Kopczynski is a family counselor at the Southern Caregiver Resource Center in San Diego. The center is part of a statewide system serving caregivers of brain-impaired adults.
For many families, adult children and spouses, there's very little planning done. They wait till the last minute. Almost 99% of the cases, they're hoping that Medicare is going to be their savior and take care of all of this. And as everybody is finding out, Medicare is only one small piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole thing. Many families, adult children mortgage their homes, or they mortgage the parents' homes. They sell the homes to pay for the care. A little planning, a little foresight could have probably changed the situation and made it more viable. But unfortunately, we do it at the last second when a change has to take place.
I've seen situations where parents didn't want anyone else to help them but their children, because they were the most familiar with their children, and so they wouldn't even allow outside help to come into the house. And that becomes more and more and more of a burden and more constricting. And that's one of those situations where I think you may have to do what's right for your parent, even if it's not what they want, or even if it's maybe not what you want, but because it has to be done and because you've had to set that limit that says, I need to take care of me as well as take care of you. And so setting limits, I think, is very, very important. The way that you would know, what limits to set and all, obviously you've got to start by putting yourself in their place. How would you feel if all of a sudden everybody's telling you now you can't drive? That you didn't pass the driving test, or your reflexes aren't as good as they used to be, so you can't drive, when what driving means is independence.
The only issue we ever did not agree on, and I just stopped talking about it and got my own way anyway, was driving cars. He still to this day believes he can get in a car and drive it. I wouldn't let him. He has no range of motion, and if he were getting in a car, it would be under an emergency circumstance where my mother would need help. I know he couldn't do it.
One of the hardest things for adult children and parents to do is struggle with power and control. The parent is always the parent, always will be the parent. The parent never really is the child, although some of the issues are childlike. But a child is always going to grow, become more independent and become strong, and the ill parent is always going to go the opposite way and need more and more care. So there's not really a role reversal, but there's certainly an addition to the role of the adult child as far as caregiving goes.
She would never tell anyone she lived here. She would always say she was visiting. And this went on for years. And even today, if I say, "Isn't it nice to be home, Mom?" she might say, "Well, can I call this my home?" "Yeah, yes, you can, Mom." But that natural desire to stay independent that is the hardest thing for people to overcome.
I noticed that in our relationship over the last two and a half years that sometimes I am the parent of my parents, and there was one time when I realized I was holding on a lot, much too tight, and I had to let him go so that he could go back to being the husband and the parent of me. I found that really tough. It was as tough as when I was letting my daughter go when she was a teenager. While I have let go and let him do the caretaking now, I have set into place a lot of procedures where I am available at a moment's notice. I always wear a pager. He has a phone that has a lot of speed dials on them where he can get, all he has to hit is a button to get my pager number. If it's an emergency, all he has to do is hit the other pager number that'll say 911 after, and I know it's my mother or himself.
Caregivers have a tendency to think that they're the only ones that can do the caring. Nobody does it better than I do. Nobody understands what they like, what they don't like. I'm the only one that can do it. But the worst thing that happens is that caregivers burn out. When they burn out, they become stressed. They may start acting out physically on the person, and abuse happens. The caregiver can start drinking, which is a real common problem. They can also be taking medication, whether it's prescription or off the street. They also lose contact with everybody else in the family and the community. They become isolated.
I have no statistics for this, but I am convinced that at the root of a great deal of elder abuse is the exhausted, frayed caregiver that at some point experiences the last straw and lashes out.
They become so guilt-ridden that they want to be there all the time. So the cycle is the more they do, the more stressed they become, the more they think they have to do, the more guilty they become, the more stressed they become. And the cycle just repeats itself over and over. So for me as a counselor and for the other staff here at the Caregiver Resource Center, it's real important for us to get through to the guilt and the denial with the caregivers so that they can get past that and accept the fact that it's okay to take a break, it's okay to go to support group, it's okay to take a vacation, it's okay to spend some time away from the family member. And that really truly makes the relationship much more valuable and much more endearing. Caregiver support groups are extremely helpful because it's a place where the person can go and there's complete non-judgment of their situation. Every other person in the group understands what they're going through. They've either been there, done that, or they're anticipating that this is where they're going to be. They understand the stress, the guilt, the depression. It's a place where they can open up and share.
The biggest thing they need to know is to get enough sleep for themselves and to eat right. And if they're not sleeping well, they need to call their doctor. I found that I did go into a depression briefly. And my way of dealing with depression is to get a lot of exercise and to start writing lists and then getting the lists completed. So I got myself out of it, fortunately. But depression is a very real issue for caretakers, and you need to take care of yourself, whether it's exercise, eating right, or enough sleep. And then you can handle almost anything knowing that it isn't forever. And probably it'll change in the next month. It might get worse, but it won't be the same.
Pay attention.
Pay attention.
Yep. All right. Now sit down on me.
The big thing is loss of freedom, and I'm retired, and this is the time of life that I would like to be able to just jump and take off for a week or two, but I can't. At least I haven't figured out how to do it yet. If my mother was not such a sweet lady, I'm not sure how I would feel about it. If she was like some people I know, I might not feel as, but she makes it so easy. I think even though I'm giving up a lot, I think I'm gaining something too.
Caregivers and families ask me all the time, what should I do? Should I keep my person at home? Should I place them in a facility? And there's no right answer for any family. It's what they want to do, it's what they can cope with the best. And the bottom line is what is best for the patient. It could be that the patient actually will get better care in a facility than they will at home.
I've never heard anyone say, I would prefer to be in an institution. That isn't something that older people want to do. We generally hear, you know, I want to do anything but go into a nursing home. That's one of the big bugaboos of older people, and rightfully so.
I hear people say, I'll never put my mom or dad in a nursing home. But there may be a time when you have to make that decision because the kind of care that they require. And if I were faced with that choice, and what I found really works, is I would find a nursing home that's as close to my home, if my parent were living in the city, as possible. I would rather find an adequate nursing home 5 minutes away than a superdangulous one 30 minutes away. Because nursing homes can take care of the physical needs of a family, but they don't take care of the family needs. And so as close as you might be able to be so that you can go over and be the emotional support while somebody else has some of the care of the physical support.
Adult children in most cases do not have the money to pay for care in a facility for mom or dad. So you're looking at mom and dad's finances, what do they have available, spending that money, and then applying for the Medi-Cal program, which will pay for skilled nursing home care when the income is low enough. And that's true across the country with Medi-Cal, with Medicaid also.
Personally, I think that they ought to try harder to provide in-home care because, you know, the average price, and I just read this a couple of days ago, the average price of care in a facility is $30,000 a year. And that's average countrywide, and in the urban areas, it comes closer to $60,000 a year. So, you know, we're just a little extra help, financial help. I think we could, you know, we could handle it here.
Medicare will provide some skilled nursing at home. It has to be quite formal. There has to be a lot of skilled need that the person would need. The other options for families are to hire help themselves privately, and obviously not every family can afford that.
I do have somebody come in every morning and take care of her. A couple of wonderful ladies that come in and give her a bath, clean her, dress her, give her breakfast.
Unfortunately, I have seen many family members lose everything financially in order to keep a loved one at home and care for them, whether it's an emotional issue for them or a financial or a family issue. They will lose everything.
When my father got out of the hospital and we started talking about what our plans were, we decided that we really would like in-home care for good. We're fairly confident that we can keep my mom in the home as long as she needs, and it's so convenient for me, so I can either sleep there, sleep here, and take care of her.
Different story.
She wants to dance.
Oh, yes.
Older people have a responsibility to plan with their children. And I would encourage adult children to perhaps force the issue is too strong a word, but to really be persistent about making plans for that time when one spouse may die, or that they may be physically debilitated in some way or mentally debilitated.
One of the things that really works is to have some what-if discussions with your parents. You know, Mom, what if you couldn't live in this apartment or this house by yourself anymore? What would be your preference? And just to open up the conversation. So often what I've seen is that parents might even say it. You know, well, when I can no longer live, you know, here, and I see kids, adults saying, oh, Mom, we'll deal with that when the time comes.
I used to wish when I was growing up that I would have the Ward-Cleaver relationship with my father, and I do now. He was always remote, always working, designing computers when I was growing up, and now I have a father who sits, and I used to think he wasn't verbal. He is absolutely verbal, and every time I come in the house, he sits and we talk. We discuss my cases, we discuss politics, we talk a lot. And I'm now getting the relationship with my father that I always wanted.
To be able to forgive your parents for things that have happened a long time ago, that is one of the most wonderful gifts that you can give yourself, and one of the most wonderful gifts you can give your parents. I would really cultivate that. There's a part of the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. When you forgive somebody, you only have to do it once. You just put yourself in that situation, and once it's over, it's over. But it's giving yourself a gift that is just a marvelous gift. And that making peace with your parents and not thinking that you've got the whole rest of your life to do that is very, very critical, I think.
This is my time to give my parents back all the extra time they spent with me as a child. Now, maybe I'm not taking them to church every day because it wouldn't mean much for my mother, but I am honoring them, and I never mind when they are cranky or out of sorts, because they never minded when I was. Not everybody gets a chance to show their honor for their mother and father.
Parenting one's parent can be a challenge, but it can also be a time for spiritual growth and family renewal. While God's Word commands us, it also delivers a promise. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Remember, when you help your parents, you honor them. When you honor them, you are always doing God's will.